subject to the risk of corruption, because it's relatively easy for those documents to be counterfeited or be manipulated in various ways. So it is a inefficient and susceptible system. Maersk and IBM have embarked on a project to use blockchain technology to create a global system to maintain all of that data in a way that is more efficient and is also tamper-proof. And the way it works is like the paper system, except without paper. As the goods move around the world, there is a record kept of every interaction that those goods have along the way. Anyone who is in that chain can see everything that has happened at every point back in the chain, and they can keep track of it as it moves through the process. So blockchain can be used to reduce the red tape, can significantly reduce delays, can significantly and perhaps even effectively eliminate the risk of fraud, save billions of dollars, and in a world where international trade is increasingly complicated, can help to some extent ease the barriers to international trade around the world. But blockchain, IoT, artificial intelligence, one thing that all of those technologies have in common is data. They need data in order to work, and they need data to be both available and able to move around the world with a high degree of efficiency in order to work. So we're here talking about transport. There are variations of this conversation happening in every economic sector that exists: manufacturing, finance, healthcare, agriculture. Literally, nearly every economic sector is having a conversation internally about how data is going to transform their sector or is already transforming the sector. And in order for governments to be able to continue to promote that, one of the things that is necessary is a regulatory framework, hopefully a regulatory framework that is as international as possible, that will help promote it. There are lots of different aspects of that. We've already heard a number of them, but I'm going to focus just on three for purposes of my remarks this morning. First is that we need to have data. Data needs to be available from a variety of sources, including the government, and we need for it to be able to move around the world with as little friction as possible. So that's the first. Second, we need to have an IoT regulatory framework that is fit for purpose. And third, we need to make sure that the data is as secure as it can be. So I'll speak briefly to each one of those. In transport, perhaps there's no other sector which is as global as the transportation sector. There's probably no other sector where it is as important for data to be able to be sourced from around the world in as efficiently and as much of a real-time basis as possible. So one of the things that we need for governments to understand and then act on is the inherently global nature of the data, which underpins all of the technologies that we are talking about. We are in a data revolution. We sometimes say that we are in the middle of a data revolution. I would say we are, in fact, at the beginning of a data revolution. There's so much happening right now, and there's so much progress that we've already seen that I think it can be easy to forget how early we are in terms of these technologies, and how important, therefore, it is not to do anything that would cast a shadow on them at the beginning. But just thinking about the amount of data that we are in the world and our ability to grasp it, one of the facts that I always think is amazing and helps give some context to the amount of data that we have, the abundance of data that exists now, but also the difficulties of harnessing it, is that if you think about all the data that has been generated by human beings and recorded from this moment back through the beginning of when human beings first started writing and recording information, 98% of the recorded data that exists today was created in the last 2 years. And that is a rate of exponential growth that shows no signs of slowing. In fact, I think it will only increase. So the ability to be able to take that data and coherently analyze it and use it so it is actually useful for human beings in the world is a considerable challenge. And one of the things that is necessary in order for that to happen is for data to be able to move around fairly easily. Transport companies cannot and should not be forced to build data centers around the world. Cloud service providers also should not. Data centers should be built where they will be most efficient and where they will offer the best service to customers. And if governments move forward with policies that would localize data or would restrict data in various inappropriate ways, that will definitely have a negative impact on the ability to innovate in these areas, and not just the efficiency, but also the timeliness with which the transport industry needs to receive data. Privacy matters a lot in this discussion. The companies that I represent in BSA, the Software Alliance, are very much at the forefront of privacy, and they go to great lengths to protect their customer data. But it is crucial that we come up with a system that is protective of data, both personal and non-personal, and much of the data that is important in the transport industry is also commercial data that is not inherently personal. But that we have a regulatory framework that allows it to be used in a way that is flexible, including the ability to repurpose data as necessary. So that means we need to find a compromise between the need of the economy to digitize and society's need to adequately protect personal data. That is particularly true for transport, or certainly it is as true for transport as it is for any other sector, in part because the transport industry routinely handles vast amounts of data and needs to be able to use that data both for efficiency but also to be able to serve its customers. In terms of IoT, IoT is an integral part of the digital revolution, and to accelerate the deployment of IoT, one of the things that the European needs to do to foster IoT adoption, which I know they are focused on, is to, again, recognize that this is inherently a global technology and do everything they can to be working with other countries to try to push for international standards. I think IoT, like many areas, is an area where if there are a number of domestic or regional standards, it is going to significantly slow the efficiency of IoT adoption, and that will be to the detriment not just of the transport industry, but of the customers that it serves. I'll briefly speak to cybersecurity. The future of transport relies heavily on the integrity of the technology and the data that underpins it. There are safety implications both for passengers and for goods if the system is susceptible to hacking or to other types of failure. So from an industry perspective, advances in cybersecurity are critical and are a number and are an enormous focus for the software industry. Governments, again, going back to my theme, need to acknowledge that this is a global system. And so we collectively will only be as strong as the weakest link in the cybersecurity chain around the world. It is critical for governments, including the European Commission, to be working with other governments around the world to try to come up with a framework for cybersecurity that is as global and as interoperable as it possibly can be. And I think this is an area where effective collaboration, not just among the governments of the world, but also among government and industry, is going to be very critical as we, meaning the industry and governments, are seeing different types of cybersecurity threats, and so the ability to share information on those cybersecurity threats as efficiently as possible is one that is, I think, absolutely vital. In conclusion, I will note that Transport Commissioner Bulc pointed out earlier this year that Europe should lead and should shape rather than suffer from the digital transformation. To allow for the modernization of the transport sector and to stay abreast and even ahead of where the international competition is, the EU needs to embrace the digital transformation. We have been very pleased to see the views that have come out from Commissioner Gabriella's office in this area. I know she is still relatively new in this role, but it's been wonderful to see the energy and enthusiasm with which she's taken on this portfolio. It is a complicated area for sure, as is any area of policy, which is new, cutting edge, and moving very, very quickly. But in it, I think, lies the key for unprecedented benefits to the European Union and to the world as a whole. So with that, very much looking forward to the panel discussion that we're going to have today. Thank you again for the invitation to be here today, and I look forward to the discussion.
Thank you so much.